We're good? We're good, come on. All right, g'day guys. It is Ben here from Hunt the Night. Now, what we're going to do tonight is really dive deep into clip-ons. Good thing about this tonight, no matter what I say here can get edited out later, but those who are watching the live stream get the raw deal. We're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff tonight in terms of clip-ons, night vision, thermal vision, front attachment, rear attachment, sensor sizes, how the influence of a scope and magnification and all that works with it. Now, but first of all, those of you who know us know that when we run our demo nights, we run them. We run them because the knowledge of Hunt the Night is the knowledge we present. So it's great to welcome Andy G from Hick Micro tonight. He's learning about what he does. Now, Andy, that might get edited out, but Steve set you up for that. Anyway, there it is. So let's jump into it. Firstly, what is a clip-on? So a clip-on is an attachment that changes your day optic into either a night vision device or a thermal device, okay? And it's done in one of really two kind of ways. We have various front attachments. Now, front attachment is always going to be a thermal attachment. A thermal attachment can never be on the rear because a thermal cannot detect heat through glass, okay? So it is a device that fixed to the front of your scope and converts this now, you're now looking at a computer screen, okay? And there's a couple of considerations to think about that too, because a lot of these are marketed as you clip them on and you go and shoot them, okay? But these come out of a factory, and the factory doesn't always align the image that is presented here with the image that is presented here, okay? So clip-ons need zeroing, front ones, not rear ones. We'll explain that in a second. So if you do put a thermal clip-on on, or a night vision clip-on, put it on paper. It's the right thing to do. Same as if you change ammo. If you shoot 150 grains and 130 grain ammo, you're going to sit there and change it, check it on paper, okay? It's the same thing. You are no longer shooting at a target, you're shooting at a computer screen, okay? And that's where a lot of people go wrong and have bad experience with clip-ons, okay? If we look at a rear attachment and say this PARD rear attachment, which is going to fit onto this scope down here, right? Yeah, I'm not going to bother with the adapter too much. We're going to talk about adapters in a minute. No zeroing is required because you're using this reticle on this side of the target to shoot at, okay? This is behind your reticle, so therefore there's no zeroing required. This can be passed between rifle to rifle to rifle and maintained at zero, okay? Night vision device only, and we'll talk a little bit about more then when we delve deep into them. So that's kind of the differences between your front and your rear attachments. And we're going to go into a little bit of night vision versus thermal. Now, I know a fair few of you here have got a thermal experience. Let's talk a little bit about night vision. So night vision is a little bit different. The way I like to explain night vision is limited by its environment, and it's exactly the same as using a spotlight. Where night vision doesn't work, a spotlight doesn't work, okay? So when we think about things like fog, mist, rain, deep humidity, long grass, tree lines, for our studio audience, when you're running a spotlight, how far can you see into a tree line? Bugger all, eh? Yeah. Right, once you hit it, you hit it. Okay, so it's the same way to think about night vision in general. So whether it's a clip-on or if it's a dedicated scope, the limitations of night vision are the limitations of a spotlight. The advantages of night vision though is 100% identification. If you can see it clearly, you'll know exactly what it is. If you're a roo harvester, you're going to know the difference between a male and a female. If you're shooting foxes around lambs, you're going to know the difference between a fox and a lamb because you're clearly going to see it in night vision, okay? Where thermal is passive. It listens to heat. So heat waves hit the sensor, creates an image, displays it. It's black and white, white or black, whatever the color palette kind of is, but there's no definition of exactly what it is, okay? You'll get an idea of what things are when you're closer to them. Foxes are going to look like a fox because their bodies are quite distinct. Deer looks like a deer, doesn't look like doesn't look like a horse, although apparently a cow can look like a hog if you use certain types of thermal devices, but I don't know. I've never had that problem in terms of identification. So, you know, when you're selecting this type of device, you've got to think not only about your budget, but your environment, okay? Night vision is incredibly cheap compared to thermal vision, but it may not work in your environment, okay? So that's something else to think about as well. Now, we're going to talk a bit more. I'm going to put this night vision stuff aside for a minute because we're going to delve a little bit more into the thermal side of things. Because just like scopes and binoculars and everything else, thermal clip-ons are available in a variety of lens sizes and sensor sizes. So what I mean by that is we've got a 50mm lens and we've got a 35mm lens, both in the HIC Micro Thunder range. This is a 640 sensor and this is a 384 sensor. Now, those of you who know me that when we're fitting people into scopes, the first question we ask is, what are you going to shoot with it? How far are you going to shoot it? Because we've got to get an understanding of matching your field of view, because this has got a narrower field of view and more magnification than this. So at, you know, longer range, or maybe that's not a great example, but say I had another 50mm in this, that was a 384 sensor. At longer range, I'm going to get better performance out of it because it's got 50% more base magnification than the 640 sensor. So in scopes, we spend, when we're talking about thermal scopes, we're spending a lot more time figuring out what it is you're shooting and matching that distance. It is now different when we're talking about thermal clip-ons, okay? A 384 sensor, which is measured in rows and columns, guys, look at my other videos. I explained all, I don't want to re-explain all of it tonight. A 384 sensor has effectively got on the back of this 0.39 of an inch screen, effectively about 110,000 pixels in it, okay? A 640, which is actually this one as well, has got about 330,000 pixels in the back of the screen in the same physical space. Now, why that's important in a clip-on is because when we attach it to our scope and we're viewing at this screen, there's no digital zoom in this, so it's always going to have the same number of pixels in this screen off the sensor as its native base magnification. So what that means is this is always going to have 330,000 pixels in a 640 on this screen. Now, as I zoom in, I'm going to see less and less of those pixels, but because that same physical space is saturated with so many more pixels, the image quality is so much better, okay? And you're going to experience that tonight when we go out and play with it. You're going to see the difference, and it means that magnification is greatly increased in these 640 devices as opposed to the 384 devices, okay? Because there's no digital magnification. When we're using a clip-on, we've got a 1-to-1 image ratio here. So from a physics point of view, if we take this, you know, 50mm, 12 micron, 640 sensor, it gives us 2.8 base magnification. Can't get away from that, that's what it is. But in a clip-on mode, it's got to be 1 magnification because you need a 1-to-1 image ratio when you shoot at it. Because if it's not, and then you put a scope on it, which is also magnified, you don't know where your bullet's going to go. So later on, guys, when we play with this, what you'll see is when we turn these clip-ons on, they use about 70% of the actual physical screen size because that allows for zeroing as well. And another point on zeroing, those manufacturers that say you don't need to zero, why do you allow us to? You know, this infrared mate can hold 4 different gun profiles. If you didn't need to zero it, you wouldn't need to hold 4 different gun profiles, all right? It's as simple as that. It's got to be checked and they've got to be tested. We've done point of impact testing on our YouTube channel, go watch it. Every single device I've tested is got a different point of impact to what my actual day optic does. Now that doesn't mean it's bad and it doesn't mean it's necessarily out by much. It might be out by an inch at 100 metres, and if you're shooting min at a deer or min at a fox, it may not matter. But it's irresponsible to throw it on and shoot at a target that's not paper in a range condition, okay? So, magnification. So all the magnification is handled via our day scope, okay? The reticle we use, the magnification we use is all based on our scope. And different devices are going to handle different magnification differently. As a general rule, 2.5 to 3 magnification is a good starting point, and you generally see the whole screen. But your bell housing here has to do with that as well. So if I was to pull out our little Crossfire here, 2 to 7 by 32, it actually sees in 2 power less of the overall screen than my helix, which is a by 50 in 2 power, which is a 2 to 16. Okay, and you guys will see this later on. Because this is a bigger physical lens, it's actually seeing more of the actual screen itself. So when you read a lot of manufacturer specifications and they say they best start at 2 magnification, it's not always right. Sometimes you see a heap of the screen as you get into those bigger objectives, but it also means that when you're using a bigger bell housing, like a 56mm, starting at 3 magnification is okay, you can get away with that because you're not actually going to crop the whole screen like you would out of using some of these smaller ones, and you'll see a little bit of that later as well. So choosing the actual magnification out of your scope is also something that you really need to consider when you're looking at clip-ons. All right. Now, for the live streamers, I'm sorry I can't take your questions tonight because technically this is the first time we're doing it, but our live audience here gets to ask any questions. Has anyone got any questions ready to ask yet? Oh. Yeah, you give. Yep.
I might be jumping the gun here, but the TQ50, when you put the TQ50C, when you put that on the front of the scope, and because I've got the impression, like everybody else, that you just clip that thing on and that's it.
Yeah.
So how do we go about aligning that picture?
Yeah.
With that crosshair?
Sure.
Do we have to move the crosshair, or do we have something aligned with it?
There's 2 ways to do it, okay? Effectively what you need to do is you need to move the point of impact under the reticle in this, okay? Now specifically with the HIC micro devices, if you hold these 2, when it's in clip-on mode, you hold these 2 buttons down, it's going to go into clip-on calibration mode. And what that allows you to do is using, I'll show you, sorry, for the live stream as well. No, I've got this camera too, I forget. Holding these 2 buttons down, it allows you then to move the image around, okay? So you normally when you sight in a rifle or like a thermal, you'll take a shot, you'll put a second heat source on the point of impact, and you'll move the reticle to that point of impact. Okay, that's what we call one-shot zeroing. It's the total opposite when you do this. It's just like sighting a glass scope. So you take your shot, you still need to put that second heat source in because it's thermal. We need to know where that point of impact was, but then we use these buttons and we adjust the collimation of the actual unit until that point of impact is under our reticle, okay? So the considerations with that is you need to do it out of a vise because any movement you have in that gun means you don't know where you're shooting again, okay? And you've got to shoot it again. So you've got to be really steady when you do it and do it in a vise. The other way to do it is you can also measure it and you can go back to your turrets because turrets are going to be MOA or MRAD when you actually this. You can click it, put your click values in and move that. Now I've done that before, and what I'll do is I'll put a piece of tape across here and I'll write my windage and elevation change because these aren't quite as accurate as these. So if you're want to head shoot rabbits, for instance, with an FX impact and you need to be very, very precise, you get it close with this, but then it's much better to finish it off with your dials because you're going to get a lot more accurate. Okay, and then you can write your windage and elevation. If you've got 0 stops, you can just turn it back to what it was. When you put this back on, you change your windage and elevation and you're going to be back to 0, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about adapter systems as part of this as well because there's different adapter systems out on the market. And we invest heavily in in the Rusan brand of adapter system. And if you want to know our intention, we carry about 400 of these in stock across 3 different ranges and millimeter sizes, and these are millimeter perfect, okay? The outer diameter of this scope is 57 millimeters. This is a 57 millimeter adapter. I put it on, I close it, it fits specifically for this. You can achieve the same thing with a shim system, okay? The issue with a shim system though is the pressure on the shim is never going to be as consistent as something that it is fitted for it. So therefore, when we put this on, if we have any misalignment in here, we're back to square in terms of needing to check our 0, okay? Because we're shooting at a computer screen, not at the end result and a target. So using the Rusan adapter system, which is actually fitted, especially if you want to use this device as a monocular in the field as well as it is a much better system to use than shim-based systems. Sorry, Andy, but the HIC Micro one with that polymer shim is the worst one on the planet. You know, I haven't seen the new one yet. No, I haven't. Right? You know, and shim systems comes in various manufacturers. You know, Pulsar make them as well. We have adapters for all the clip-ons that we sell to convert them to Rusan adapters, so we can get that millimetre perfect. It means you can take it from one rifle to another, change your gun profile or whatever it needs to be. You can strip it down, put it back on your same gun, and you're not losing zero. Okay, they're 100% repeatable when you do it like that. We have what we call the modular system, you know, as well. So I'm just going to take this off the scope for a moment and show you this. Right. And this system allows us to actually leave the bell housing of the modular connector actually on the scope, and we can then, actually that's not a modular, that is, sorry, then we can unlock and lock it back on and off the scope. So you can quickly transport it between different platforms with a quick detach. The other advantage to that, and I don't have it here tonight, and thanks to all my customers who lent me one but didn't, I don't have it here, but I'll simulate one. Rusan have a monocular connector, which is also quick detach, which can go in and out of this, use it as a monocular, and then straight back onto the scope within seconds. Now, I wouldn't do it for shooting like foxes, because foxes move really quick, but when you're talking about staticky type animals like pigs and deer, for instance, it works well because they don't move real quick. You can go back to your rifle and away you go, okay? There are other systems out there. This is Infraray's monocular attachment. But if you want to use this Infraray mate as a monocular, and even if you're running their proprietary adapter, you have to remove this adapter, screw this on, screw it back off, and put it back on. So it's either a monocular or it's a clip-on, okay? HIC Micro do the same with their Thunder version 1 series. They marketed this as a 3-in-1 device, which technically it is, but it's not 3-in-1 at the same time. You can put a rail on this and it's a scope. You can put the clip-on adapter on here, and if you use the HIC Micro one, it screws on and off, and then you've got to screw their eyepiece on and off, okay? Using the Rusan system, it truly is a bit more of a 2-in-1 device because it can be used multi-purpose in the field. So we don't really try and promote clip-ons as multi-purpose devices. It's more versatility that you get out of a clip-on than it is, you know, multi-purpose. Because the other thing too is, right, when you throw a clip-on attachment on here, it's either 2.5 or 3 power, or I think this is a 4 power in the Infraray one. That's it, there's no digital zoom. So it's really just for scanning in that magnification, and then you're taking it back off and throwing it back on your rifle. So it's not how I like the product marketed, but you know, I understand why it's marketed in that sense as well. So yeah, not quite 3-in-1, but you know, 2-in-1 with the Rusan system is quite achievable on static animals. The reason I say not really foxes, because foxes move really quick, so do dogs. You could be like this and go, within 2 seconds you go, target acquisition, where is it? You know, so it's a little bit harder. Deer tend to sit there, head down, eating away. Pigs don't move real quick. You can go back to your rifle and so on, okay? I can't remember what your question was, Laurie, but I think I answered it.
You did.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Where was I up to? Okay, so that was a little bit about talking about mounting in terms of Rusan and you know, and shim-based systems. I'd consider using Rusan, and any kind of really the front attachment is be aware of how much clearance you need. You need about 4 or 5 mil for these adapters to go on. So a lot of people buy these and they've got their, you know, nice low profile scopes riding the barrel type thing, and they go, oh crap, now I've got to buy more rings. It's great for us. We get to sell a set of rings as well. But just think about that up front as well in terms of how that's done. Now, another thing you need to think about scopes is parallax, okay? So parallax is basically your ability to focus an image. It's not as important when we're talking about front attachments. When you set the parallax to kind of, you know, the closest measurement, because we're, you know, here, you get a pretty good image throughout, kind of that, in depending on the device, up to kind of 6 or 7 power, okay? When you have parallax even in a thermal scope and you want to push the device further, you're going the opposite way to infinite. And that's going to clear up the screen a little bit and give you a bit more magnification out of it. Because when you're using these, it's not the image that gets worse. It's like putting your head really close to a television and you see the pixels and you start to see those individual dots on the screen. That's where the image degradation comes in this. Unlike digital zoom, that more you zoom it, the less information is actually presented on the screen, but it's still got to fill the screen with information for it to work. Magnification on this is a little bit different. So parallax on a rear attachment, also on a front attachment, is an advantage, but it's not required. Parallax on a rear attachment is required, okay? The reason is because when you want to use your reticle, this PARD unit, which is an excellent little unit for what it is, this has to focus on the reticle, okay? And the reticle's in back here, and it's got to focus on it to make that reticle clear so you can actually use it for shooting. So then you need something to focus this end. You need something to focus the actual image. So you need to have either side or front parallax, doesn't matter what it is, as long as you've got parallax adjustment, to actually focus that image. Otherwise, these rear attachments aren't going to work, okay? There's a lot of people who are unaware of that, because we sell a lot of day scopes with parallax to people who we haven't sold these devices to, okay? And one thing we always tell people, if you're looking at a rear attachment, parallax is a key. Without it, it's a real hit and miss, okay? It doesn't work real well because of the way this just has to focus on that reticle. Other things to consider when you're looking at choosing a scope or scopes you might have, if you're setting up a rifle and it's a day scope, you want to put a clip-on on as well. Illuminated reticles, because you're shooting at night with a black reticle on this side, and if you want to be able to shoot on black hot, for instance, because my brain works better on black hot than it does white hot, you've got a black reticle on a black target. Illuminated reticles are really good. They work with both first and second focal planes. Your holdover information in a first focal plane scope will stay true when you put a thermal attachment on, so you've got that holdover. But if you've got some of those Tremor 3 type reticles that are like really Christmas tree-y, they're hard to use on a clip-on just because you've got the brightness of that screen, and first focal plane, you've got that tiny little bit of information in that plane in the lower magnifications where these clip-ons generally work best, okay? Not to say that it doesn't work, but just as a consideration, your reticle, pick your reticle as opposed for what you want to do. You can certainly use first focal planes, but I'd look for ones that are not so Christmas tree in your reticle selection. But certainly illuminated reticles are, I would say, key to having a good experience with them. Now we're going to run through some actual details of the actual individual units we've got here, because I love clip-ons. I use clip-ons all the time. This is actually my personal device. I had to go home today and get it because I forgot it. But we got devices from Hick Micro. This is the brand new device from Krypton. And what I'm going to touch on really, more so than anything else, is usability and in terms of button systems, battery systems, and what kind of magnification ranges they're good for. Okay, so I'm going to start with the brand new Pulsar Krypton 2. Just been released. The Krypton was the device I used to use before Infrared introduced the Mate, and the Krypton 2 is not a bad unit if you're a right-handed shooter. And why I say that is because this is a 65, which is I think for this scope. No, can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is how it's aligned. This is how it sits on the unit. This is the battery pack, sits on top, which is much better. The old Krypton had the battery on the side, and these IPS batteries are pretty heavy, so you can imagine the weight displacement, okay? So it's like that, okay? But if you're a left-handed shooter, where are your controls? They're on the right-handed side, okay? So for a right-handed shooter, this focus knob is your focus knob here. I am going to do a review on this next week when I get back from Fiji. It is a much, much better unit, image quality-wise, magnification-wise, than the Krypton 1, okay? What I don't like is this. I found this, I was out shooting with the other night, and I find the button system a little bit not real logical, because you've got to really figure out where your fingers are in terms of how to press the menu button, then how to get through to the other things. A couple of things that I do love about that done from a software side. When we zoom in on the back of this, and you guys are going to see this later, and live stream guys, you're just going to have to take my word for it, but as you see less and less of the screen, it means we're going to see less and less of the icons, okay? So things like battery indicators, the time, are we recording, not recording, that type of stuff. All those little periphery information, as we zoom in, because we're zooming in on the screen, we see less of it. What Pulsar have done is you hold this button down here, and it's got 3 different levels of menu size, and it goes narrower, narrower, narrower each time, and it's fantastic. As you get into those higher magnifications, you get to see that that information really well. Infrared do it a little bit differently. They have gun profiles that are set up for starting at kind of 2 magnification and then kind of 5 magnification, so it's kind of fixed. But the dynamicness of this one is actually quite intuitive. I really like that. But I'll go more detailed into this unit, as it is, with a good parallax scope. Like on my element, which I tend to run my clip-ons now on my element scopes because they work really, really well. I can push this up to about 8-10 power without losing too much image quality. Certainly on bigger animals like deer. Probably struggle on foxes out past 200, pushing it beyond that, because it does that because foxes are small, then you get to see all those pixels that become quite big. But on deer and stuff, you can push that out quite well. It's nice, and it's nice lightweight. As opposed to the old Krypton Mark 1, this is a much lighter system. And what we'll do is we'll do a weigh off, some scales. Actually, I'll put it under here so Steve can see it. So, and this is when people say they lose 0 because of the weight. It's not. We're not adding more weight than these scopes can handle, because these can handle high levels of recoil. If they're going to bend because we're going to stick this on, imagine what they're going to do under a 375 or a 338 lap unsuppressed and without a muzzle brake, okay? So this one here with an adapter is going to add about 653 grams, and that is actually quite light for a clip-on. It's not too bad. If we have a look at the new HIC Micro Thunder V2, and I'm only going, same kind of 695 grams, same kind of thing. Now, we're going to talk about the Thunder range. We're going to put the Pulsar side together. This is what they call the V2. I wish or the 2.0, I wish they didn't call it that. I'm sorry, Andy, we've had this discussion. It's nothing new. I wish they called this Lightning, okay? Because this is the Thunder version 1. And there's a couple of really significant differences. We'll look at them like for like. This is the TQ50 in the original, and this is the TQ50 version 2. Look at the difference in size for a start. Okay, this is 555 grams with batteries in it, and this one is 696. This is your lightweight, compact, multi-use device because it's a 3-in-1. The new clip-ons is not a 3-in-1. This is a clip-on only. It's not a clip-on and a scope. It's now just a clip-on, okay? So there's a little bit of confusion in terms of the naming convention, but that doesn't take away from how good these devices are. Now, if anyone here has used, and if any of you guys have used the Falcon series of thermal binoculars with the HIC Micro 20 Net-D sensor, you'll know how good they are. Yeah, welcome to that in a clip-on. Nice unit. It's the button system I really love. This is actually one of my favourite button systems on any scope I've ever used because it's so intuitive with the 4 buttons and the menu one in there, okay? Anytime you put buttons in line, you've got to think about which button am I pressing. You don't need to worry about it with this, and I love this button design. It's absolutely fantastic. So the button system isn't quite as intuitive, but seriously, when you're dealing with clip-ons, you're either pressing record or you're changing color palettes. You're not doing too much else with them because there's not much else to do. You're not zooming, you're not going into digital zoom, you're not going to really change brightness and contrast too much. It is what it is. Image quality is great. Again, good parallax scope. You can push this up to kind of 10 to 12 power. On these units, they're quite nice units. And the image quality on these and the definition on these new HIC Micro Thunders are awesome. But I don't actually think we've got them as clip-ons yet, do we, Andy, in these? This could be an unreleased device because it's Andy's. Excellent little unit, okay? And the other thing too that I really like in these units is this new battery pack. And this is well, some people love the next version of the scope we're going to talk about and some don't. This gives you a heap more longer run time, 7 hours out of it before you change it. It comes with 2 batteries. It's great. It's a proprietary battery. which I'm sure they're going to make for a very long time. I always get worried about proprietary batteries because at some point they're going to be discontinued. Good for me, not good for you. I've got to buy a new scope. So hopefully they're going to last like 12 months, the batteries, Andy, and they're going to come up with something else. These little Thunders, we have sold an absolute bucket load of this specific model, which is the TH35. This is fantastic for your short range, rabbit, deer, pig type thing, short range. We've got a couple of guys using them for foxes. It's not necessarily mine, because once you get over about 6 power, the image starts to struggle a little bit, but they're powered by CR123 batteries. Now, you get about 2 hours of runtime into that before you're changing batteries. And maybe I'm just lazy. Some people love it because they're CR123 batteries. They're so available, they're rechargeable. We sell an 8-pack, it gets you going all night. But you know, these are lightweight as well. We're talking 495 grams. You know, you want to throw that on an air rifle, on a 22, 17 HMR type thing, anything under that kind of 150 odd meters or anything under 6 magnification. That's one actually thing I should talk about too. When people say, how far can I shoot with that? Because these are limited by the magnification of the day optic and how well they are effective, it's an easy one. How comfortable are you shooting at 6 power? How far can you shoot at 6 power comfortably on a small target or a big target, depending on what you're shooting? It's a much easier one than when you're talking about a digital scope, when you're getting into digital levels of zoom. You know, you really got to think about magnification, because if you're shooting foxes at 300 meters on a regular basis off a 204, you want something with more magnification than less. You know, not so much of a consideration when you're talking about this. It's more how comfortable are you shooting at kind of 6 power, okay? And then you've got the TQ50, which is the 640 version, which we kind of touched on before, or the Thunder. Same CR123 battery system, push it to about 8 power. I thought you were going to get a little bit more out of these units. The only issue with these, which restricts how much power you can actually push them, and they've resolved it on this new one, is this little lens system here. It's got a really small little lens that actually takes from the screen and projects it onto here and gives us that 1-to-1 magnification. It is actually the limiting factor of this particular TQ50 in terms of its ability to push past magnification, because you don't get a lot more magnification out of this as opposed to this, even though this is a 640 sensor, because you really start to see the separation of pixels of the actual physical screen itself. The reason why this is a clip-on only is because they've resolved that in this lens system back here. You can't take that on and off and expect to have the same experience then as a scope, so it's much better like that. And then, you know, we've got this new little PARD unit too, which is pretty cool. So this is a pretty lightweight unit too. Now this has got the adapter on. I'll take the adapter off. It's a pretty little funky system in terms of, you've got a little lever, battery in it, and it's, you know, 467 grams. But this has got an integrated rangefinder in it, which is pretty cool, okay? It's a small compact unit. This is great for throwing on things like blackouts, where you want to know your range, or if you're shooting subsonic and you want to know that range before you pull the trigger. It's not a long distance unit. But, you know, for shooting again out to that kind of 6-7 power on your optical, it's pretty cool having that integrated rangefinder, and it gives you that information on the screen. Because the next one we're going to look at, the Mate, which is my favourite, I love it, has also got an optional rangefinder, but adds a fair bit of weight, okay? So, you know, this one here with the rangefinder is 850 grams, so it's a bit more weight. It's got an internal battery in it as well, non-changeable battery, so it's something that if it ever dies, it's got to be serviced. But it does come with this neat little external battery as well, which clips onto the side of your scope and can clip on here and add additional power into the unit. So, you know, you get about 6-7 hours of runtime combined. The rangefinder on it is really cool. It is aligned, when you put this on, you align it with your reticle. So you actually use your reticle to do the range finding. A lot of the digital scopes, or actually every digital scope that you have, the range finder has a separate range finding box. It's not aligned with the reticle, okay? Because of the way you zero the scope, there's no possible way to do that. With these, you zero the range finder to the scope, and that's pretty cool. This one here is one of the best thermal imaging devices I've ever used, hands down. I can run this up to 16 power on my element scope and still be happy with it. It is a sensational device. Infrared have nailed it. They've got this huge, nice, big objective lens here on the back, which you can see creates a really, really good magnification process on through here. It can hold, you know, multiple gun profiles. The other thing I like too with this, and the Pulsar one isn't bad either. The Pulsar devices, the Kryptons and so on, come with this little remote control that you can mount to your buttstock and control the unit. The infrared one's got one as well, which I like. I actually like this one better because I'm worried about losing this one, because without this, you're not using the device. But you can take this, because every time don't forget, when we're talking about front attachments, anytime you do want to change it or you want to focus it, you've got to reach forward. At least this takes the menu-driven stuff if you want to record, because there's a record audio and things like that as well. You know, you can hit that button here. If you want to change colour palettes, you can hit that button there from the comfort of your buttstock rather than having to reach forward all the time. So it is a little bit of a consideration from that point of view. The other thing I'm going to touch on too is I like these top-focused knobs better than these side-focused knobs. And the only reason why is because when these are attached to a scope, and you're holding your rifle on a rest or a tripod or something like that, when you put that torsion into it, if it's tight, you're going to pull your rifle a little bit. The adapters are always tight, but you know, sometimes there's a little bit of play, and it just can be, you're just putting a little bit of torsion through it. I really like these focus knobs located on the top, because you're just not having that torsion. It's a little bit different if you're using a dedicated scope, when you've actually got a lot more, and when you've got it in a hold and you're actually turning it, it's a little bit different because there's no play, but because they're so far forward as well, it just creates torsion through it. So it's a minor thing, but you know, when you play with them that as often as I do, minor things, you get to, you know, be picky about things. So yeah, look, honestly, the Mates are one of the best units I've used, even just as a thermal imaging device. And that's not a slight on any of these other devices. They're all excellent, and everyone's going to look through these and they're all going to have a different appreciation for each unit, whether it's a weight, whether it's a form factor, whether it's I'm very familiar with the Krypton 1 and I want to keep the same menu format going, okay? You know, I already run the HIC Micro app because I've got my HIC Micro spotter. I want to be able to record, share, and that I don't want to have to become familiar with a secondary device. When I say this is probably the best device here, you know, I love it, but it's not, this does an excellent job too. You know, it's not, you wouldn't buy something different because of it, if that makes sense. This at the moment is just my favourite, and it's going to get replaced one day, I can guarantee it, because something new is going to come out and I'm going to go, ooh, I really like that one. So, you know, it's not, none of these devices are bad. The thing about Hunt the Night is I test it all. If I don't like it, we don't sell it. There are devices from every manufacturer that I don't sell. So for instance, Pulsar sell the Proton device, clip-on. I wouldn't sell it because there's no focus ability to focus the image. So it's fixed focal length. For me, that doesn't, you know, it's a budget device, doesn't fit into how we work and what we do as a business, okay? HIG Micro got the LC series of monoculars. I'd never sell one. So, you know, Infrared have got their LC version of those types. They're just not us. I've got to like it for us to sell it. So when I say this is my favourite, I really like these as well. They're a really nice family. This is just my favourite child at the moment, studies artist, that's all. You know, I use this one for quite some time too, which is really nice. So it's not to, you know, to say they're not bad, they're not good, they're just a little bit different. Now, so that's kind of a more in-depth look into the individual clip-ons we sell. Any questions?
Are any of them waterproof, Matt?
Yeah, they're all IP67 rated. Okay. Yeah, so we generally don't sell anything that's not. And actually, only because there's nothing on the market that isn't, you know, as well. Everything is IP67 rated these days.
Also,
yeah.
used to be one of the only ones that was early on.
Yeah, but you've, in the last kind of 2 years, you've seen a huge emergence of other brands entering this space, like HIC Micro, for instance, one of the biggest thermal manufacturers in the world, but they're probably smallest in hunting, okay? Well, they're for them. That's fair to say, isn't it? Because HIC Vision is a ginormous in security and military and everything else. So you're seeing this emergence of other brands into this space that weren't there, where previously you really had a choice out here of kind of ATN, Nitek, Pulsar. Now we've got a brand new brand every day almost. and we've tested a fair few of them, and yeah, you know, so some are better than others. But yeah, it's all generally IP6, 7 rated. But you know, if you're a fair weather shooter, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, not everyone has that option. Cool, Philip.
So for the front clip-on,
Yep.
do we, because with the reticle in this base,
Yes.
how, and then we shoot from the screen.
Yes.
Do we see two reticles?
No. No, there are no reticles in a front attachment. You only use your reticle, and this is why it's important to zero it and to check it, okay? And that's a bit of a misconception as well, is people think there's going to be another reticle to shoot at. There's not, because the way digital reticles work is, I mean, I guess in theory, if you didn't want to look at your reticle, you could zero this to a particular, anyway, no, there's not. There's one reticle. You only ever use your reticle, okay? And that doesn't matter if it's a front or a rear attachment, you only ever use your reticle. Sometimes you might have to align or zero it so where you shoot is actually where it's hitting on the computer screen, okay? And I keep going back to computer screen because that's the thinking I want you guys to have. You're not shooting at a target, you're seeing a target, but you're effectively shooting at a computer screen because that's where the point of impact is going to be representative, and it just may not be aligned as you are visually seeing the target through this device.
So for the infrared MH50,
Yep.
we got like 4 sets of memory in there. Like
Correct.
G1, G2,
Yep.
G4, right?
Yep.
G4, right?
Yes, 4. Yep.
That means I can use a swap between like 4 rifles?
Yes, you can.
Just to put like a G1,
Yep.
this one?
Correct. Yep. And I think Hick Micro's introduced that now into the new series as well, but I think they've got 5, not 4 from memory.
Can I ask something about a reticle?
Yes?
So what I use a reticle for inside of the micro, because you can turn it on.
Yes.
I use it as a reference guide. So
Yes.
if I start in already,
Yep.
I put it on top.
Yes.
I align the reticle with my scope.
Yes.
Together with the actual front attachment.
No.
So you actually have a reference point.
Okay. With these devices, when they're in clip-on mode, you cannot turn the reticle on. The 2 you can. Yeah, so the 2's got a different one. It's got that line through it as well, doesn't it? Which you can use as a referent.
You can put a whole reticle up.
You can put a whole reticle up, okay. I haven't attempted to try that, but yes. Our Pulsar, the Krypton 2's got that as well. It's got alignment, so it'll actually give you a reticle on the screen, takes up the whole thing. It's a green one. It's actually 2 lines on your X and Y, and you align it to there as a reference. So you can do that as well. And that's also a good way to actually test how good these adapters are, because when you put it back on, you want to make sure you're in that exact same spot, you know. So if you're using a shim-based adapter and you put it back on and it's in a different spot, you know your point of impact has changed. I know I had this one out the other night. I can put this in, and this has got what their Pulsar screen positioning in this Russo one, so you can actually move it around and so on. But I'd align this one up, put it back, and it's bang on. So yeah, I wasn't aware you could do that with that. I know you couldn't do it with these. Originally when these came out, you could do it, and then they changed it because in certain European countries you can't have reticles. You're not allowed to have the reticles, so they actually disabled the reticles altogether when it was in clip-on mode. So yeah, new one you can. Okay, cool. Yeah, well that's good from a point of reference point of view, and it's good from a safety check point of view that when you do move it, am I back in that same point of impact? Yeah, no, it's good they introduced that, because that single line that's available in this one is good from a horizontal, but it doesn't give you any vertical shift or anything like that. So, cool. Damn it, Andy. Now I'm going to have to invite you to do our demo nights because you're going to be able to explain the product better and all. Man, Steve gave me that bad joke and now you... Anyway, any other questions?
I've got
Yep.
one. I might be harking back to the days of the old double part, but
Yep.
When you go choosing scopes,
Yep.
Does it matter if they've got certain IR filters on them? Because I've run more of an IR
Yes.
filter thing.
Okay. Yep.
And I take it the side preference is always the side
Parallax?
parallax,
Yep.
the front parallax, but could you use these on a front parallax scope? Or is it too much?
If you're using a rear attachment, it doesn't matter where the parallax is, as long as you've got parallax adjustment, okay? It's just easiest from the side, you're not reaching forward, but it doesn't matter because it's parallax adjustment, okay? If you're using a front attachment, you can put it over a parallax adjustable scope because it's just the knurling, but it just means you can't adjust it while it's on, okay? But that's only for a thermal attachment. Oh, sorry, or a night vision, yeah.
If I had a thermal
Yep.
attachment,
Yep.
I typically would leave the scope set up.
Yep.
But if it did shift a little bit, would you over change it or?
Yeah, so when, that's actually a good question because alignment is key as well, okay? When we put these devices on, and the thing I like about this Rusan system is you can clip this off and this housing doesn't interfere with your objective and you can leave this on. So every time I put it on, it's back in the same spot, okay? And the importance of that is because the screens that are in the back of these are grids and they're squares, okay? If I was to align the clip-on an angle like this, the image would still look like it's horizontal to me, but now my actual screen is in diamonds. And I'm actually shooting at a different set of pixels as if I was shooting like this. So I'm gonna have a point of impact change, okay? If you are taking these on off your bell housing, it's kind of okay, and what Andy was talking about using the point of reference in the devices you can use. These Rusan ones, because they're quick detach, you're always going to put these back into a similar type of position where they're facing up, you know, as well, because you get that alignment. And it's got to be a pretty big change for it to make a significant impact. But if you do rotate it kind of that much, you'll get about an inch. And we've done that in our point of impact testing on YouTube. So yeah, the other thing you can do, and I've done this as well, with that bit of tape that I talked about when I put my elevation change, sometimes I just have a bit of tape there. So when I put it back on, I can align it. Now, some people will put a proof mark by scratching it or something like that, but the problem is you can't see that at night. If you take it off, you can feel the tape and kind of get it back in the right spot. So, you know, and again, if it's a micro change, it doesn't really matter too much. It's more if it's a major change. So, yeah, that's a good question. Alignment is...
A degree either way is not going to affect it too
No, a degree either way isn't going to affect it too much, but, you know, 45 is.
much.
Yeah.
I wasn't too sure how many degrees you...
Well, I haven't measured it in terms of going through. I just went, oh, if I do that, how far off am I? Yeah.
Basically, you put it out of a bag, you just don't notice, you just tweak it ever so slightly.
Yeah.
You noticed it.
Yeah, look, typically if you've got it set up right, you know, when we put these attachments on the back, we Loctite them on. So they're never coming off, okay? So, you know, you want to reduce as much play as you can. You know, these do lock well into position when they're on, and you actually lock them up correctly. You know, there's no play in that. So it's really unlikely you're actually going to move. You know, what I typically do though is if I'm in transit, because it doesn't fit well in my gun bag real well, I'll actually just slip that off. And then when I get back out of the car, I just throw it back on because the rangefinder sticks out to the side. I can't close my bag up properly or my case. So I just do it like that and put it back on and I'm back to zero as well. Yep. So, yeah.
Just a bit of an odd question regarding that. You say in scopes before we take some, you know, serious recoil and stuff
Yep.
like that. How would that do on a scope if it was mounted on the front? Would that mechanism built into the scope be able to survive that type of recoil, or is that just purely to keep away from that heavy stuff?
No, most of these handle recoil pretty well.
The night vision, yes.
Yeah.
I meant the actual scope it's on.
Yeah.
The scope's internal.
Internals.
Internal weight. Does that actually come in with seals and stuff?
No, not that I'm aware of. Yeah, it's a good question. Not that I'm aware of. And we'll probably see and understand that more as the years progress and people had clip-ons for longer. At the moment, you know, 18 months ago, you see, when people go clip-ons aren't as good as dedicated scopes, 18 months ago I would have agreed with them, okay? These days when people say that, my answer is they haven't used a good clip-on, okay? So it's really kind of only been in the last 6 to 12 months where we've seen really high-end clip-ons and volume of them. We're starting to clip on, we don't really know the overall effect for a long period of time. But the good thing is, these Vortex scopes, they've got a no questions asked, you know, Zerotech, you know, no questions asked, lifetime warranty. I don't know if this should end up on the live stream, but anyway, questions gotta be careful. We always ask, what caliber did you have your scope on? Because it's got to be within the manufacturer's tolerances.
It's always a 223.
Yeah, always. That's correct. That's generally, you know, I'll be like, oh, you had this on your 223 again. Yeah, anyway. No, look, you've got to be, you know, thoughtful and mindful and you're kind of responsible. But, you know, recall per calibre isn't a real good measure because I've got a mate who's got a 12 kilo 338 and the thing moves as much as my 22. I've got a super lightweight 3006 that if I don't have my suppressor on it, it ends up kind of behind me. So it produces a lot more recoil. So calibre-based recoil isn't really, and you see that these days, these are all generally measured in joules than they are in, just to make it harder because no one's got any idea how to measure it, you know. So from that point of view. In terms of rear attachments, because recoil is something you kind of need to be consider because this length of the, the length of these rubber boots on the back of your scopes are generally designed by the manufacturer to represent your eye relief. So you can see how short that is. You stick that on a big caliber rifle and you don't have a good hold, you expect to tell everyone about it tomorrow when they're asking, oh, what's that cut on your face? So it is something mindful because these push back further on your cheek piece as well, your weld generally in stability is kind of in question a little bit more, you know, as well when you're running these rear attachments. These rear attachments have come a really long way. Now, when you use these rear attachments, they've got about 4 magnification, so you see a lot less of your reticle. You're basically seeing the middle, if you're running a second focal plane scope, you're basically seeing just kind of the middle of the reticle. You don't have a really wide field of view on them. There's no way to get around that because you can't make an adaptive lens system like you can with clip-ons. So you do have quite a narrow field of view, but the image quality you're getting out of these new PARD units, especially with their laser and not their LED-based LED lights, is sensational. I did actually some footage of a customer the other day who had an external light with his, a sniper hog light, which he'd matched up with this. And I think it was like 600 metres. He was looking at foxes or something like that and threw it up on a YouTube thing. It's sensational what you can actually see out of these things these days. Now, but lens coatings, yes, they have an effect. I know of 2 particular brands of scopes that don't work real well with the lens coatings from my experience. I just don't know how well I want to name them, but we can talk about that later. Just because I'm, you know, I don't, you know, we'll talk about that later, but just because it's going to be recorded and it's on live, but I'm sure if you Googled it, they're very popular branded scopes, but it's just rear attachments. Doesn't have any issues with front, but some coatings interfere with the LED, the eye infrared, and therefore if it's a rear attachment and you're not getting a clean signal onto your sensor, you're not going to have a great experience with it, okay? So there are a couple of brands that we watch out for and don't recommend to use these on. Typically those scopes don't have parallax anyway, so we're already saying to people, hey, be mindful of these particular brands because they don't have parallax and you're not going to have a great experience anyway, okay? Totally different when you put a front attachment on, and again, we're talking about a computer screen right up against the lens, bright AMOLED OLED screens, and that's the biggest change too in these. You know, kind of 2 years ago when these were LCOS screens, so liquid crystal displays, which activate differently, nowhere near as good as what we're seeing now. That's why these clip-ons have come such a long way in such a short period of time, you know, as well. It used to be, and cost is something to talk about too, because it used to be people would get into a clip-on because they think it's cheaper. This infrared mate without the actual rangefinder is as expensive as any of the top tier thermal scopes we sell, and then you've got to buy adapters, you know, and these adapters are $250 each. So, you know, if you want to put on 4 scopes, there's another $1,000 you've got to think of. That's pushing you past things like Pulsar XP50s and, you know, infrared TH50 V2s and the PQ50s from Hig Micro and stuff like that. So that top tier of those scopes is surpassed by a very good thermal clip-on. So that's another, you know, you don't think about, I'm going to buy a clip-on because it's cheap. No, you're buying a clip-on because it's versatile. You're buying a clip-on because you love your reticles in your scopes. They're set up well. You don't want to make modifications. You are day-night shooting, okay, you know, as well. That's what you're buying clip-ons for. If you're setting up a dedicated night scope, I probably wouldn't run a clip-on because I'm adding a fair bit of weight to weight, you know. We've already got a scope, and some of these scopes are going to be, you know, like this Zerotech Thrive HD. We'll get a weight on that. So there's 933 grams, okay? And I throw my mate on here with an adapter and an LRF, and now that's another 962 grams. I'm talking 1.8, almost 2 kilos just in my scope. I do not have a dedicated thermal scope that runs at 2 kilos. The heaviest I've got are kind of the Thermtex, which have got 60mm lenses, and they're dual field of view, so there's a fair bit in them, and they're about 1.2 kilos. So you're talking about a lot of weight. So I probably wouldn't do it if it's for a dedicated nighttime scope. And then you've got expense. You know, you're talking about again spending another $1,000 on a good quality optic, or $1,400-1,500 on a good quality optic to get the best out of a clip-on. You know, you're spending a lot of money you probably don't need to achieve the same kind of thing in a dedicated build. If that makes sense. I mean, you could also argue you could spend all that money, get better image quality, but that's a different argument. Yeah. Any other questions before we go and play? For the live streamers, Steve, we good? We're on a delay.
Sorry?
We're going to wrap up the live stream. The live stream. I think we've covered it all. You got any further questions? Is there anything I haven't explained because you've been listening?
No.
No?
You've done everything.
I've done everything?
Yep.
I get paid today? Okay, no other questions before we go start playing with stuff? All right, so the people that have joined us online, hey, thanks heap. This is going to be a regular event for us, not on clip-ons, but on different aspects. If you've got a topic you want us to cover, throw it in the comments, because we'll add it to it, but we are going to cover specific things. So another one we're going to have coming up, and it may be the next one, I'm not sure, but it's going to be on dual field of view. We're waiting on one more manufacturer to come to the party, and then we're going to talk about dual field of view binoculars, scopes, and the advantages and pros and cons of dual field of view, because that's a really exciting development in that space. We're going to have other ones based on, different things. We've got a few things planned. So if you've got anything you want specifically covered, we will do a short one on shooting positions and tripods and bipods and monopods and that type of stuff. So it doesn't just have to be thermal related. It might be, how do I shoot from a tripod effectively? Because everyone sets up wrong behind a tripod, and then they go, why did I miss that? Simple. So throw it in the comments, throw it in our group on Facebook. We've been Hunt the Night, and I'm saying good night. I don't know if we're out yet, or if we're finished, but thanks for the clap, guys. Okay, so what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to take this shit out and play with it. I've got a whole bunch of different scopes, and there's a couple of things I want you to experiment and experience.